Hi everyone, and today we're going to talk about ecosystems. And what is an ecosystem? Well, the word is a mixture of the words ecological and system, as you may have noticed, and it's really just that. How does the ecology of the world work? How does life interact with itself and each other? So if we're going to define an ecosystem, we will say it is all of the plants and animals that live in an area, and also all the non-living physical and chemical factors that they interact with. So if you look at this picture, there's many trees, which are living things, but you assume there are animals living there too. The water is a non-living factor, but many creatures will live in there. And the soil and the rocks will provide nutrients to the plants particularly, but that in turn helps the animals. And it all takes place underneath the weather and the sunshine coming from above. So we need to define a difference between ecosystems and biomes. So biomes are types of ecosystem that you can find in many places, but an ecosystem is a single example of a biome in a single location. So if you look at these three pictures, then you will see that if I ask you what type of ecosystem they are, you will probably say desert. But none of them are the same as each other. Three different desert ecosystems can all be part of the desert biome. So here is a map of how terrestrial biomes are spread around the world. And you can see they have names like tropical rainforest, or tundra, or temperate deciduous forest, etc. They are just general types of landscape. So there are many different types of ecosystem, and we're going to divide them into three headings. First, terrestrial ecosystems. So those are found on land, like the biomes we saw on the previous slide. So these are desert, forest, temperate, Arctic, and many more. So here are some examples. This would be a form of savanna with widely spaced trees. There is a deciduous forest, an alpine pasture, a coniferous forest, an Arctic ice floe, an Arctic tundra, a swampland or fen, dune desert, this is a temperate forest, and finally a semi-arid desert. So as you can see, there are an awful lot of different types of terrestrial ecosystem, and these are only a few that we have mentioned. So next we have aquatic ecosystems. Those are ecosystems that are found in water. And there are three main types of these too. I know we keep dividing and subdividing, and we will continue to do so. So the three main types are lentic ecosystems, which are still water. They are lake ecosystems. Lotic ecosystems, which are running water, rivers and streams. And then finally, of course, oceanic ecosystems, which are saltwater ecosystems, which are seas of different depths. As we said, of course, the broad types of ecosystem are also subdivided. If we look at oceanic ecosystems, then you can see that they are divided into coastal and open sea ecosystems. And in the coastal area, there are estuarine ecosystems, which are partly enclosed. And then there are continental shelf, which is out at sea but near to land, so that it's still fairly shallow. And those are the coastal ecosystems, or at least two possible subtypes. And then you have the open sea ecosystems. So these are euphotic, which is water that gets a lot of light. Then there's bathyal ecosystems, where the water gets a little light. And finally, abyssal ecosystems, where water gets no light at all. And there are some pretty weird creatures that appear down there, although we really don't know that much about it because we haven't really explored properly in the deepest parts of the ocean. And of course, this diagram is not to scale. If that trench were really 10,000 meters deep, then the euphotic layer would be thinner than one of the red dotted lines that marks the depth of 200 meters. And there are also urban ecosystems, which are, I suppose, just a certain type of terrestrial ecosystem, but they are a little bit special because they have been changed or created entirely by man. And the way that humans have affected the environment has affected the landscape, but also the animals. And some animals, particularly things like rats and foxes, have found new niches to fit into when living in urban environments. And urban environments come in all different forms, and various different new survival niches have been discovered. So the next thing we're going to talk about is food chains. So all ecosystems must form around a food chain. And this is an example of one on the right. A food chain is a line of organisms which eat or are eaten by each other. So carnivores are animals which eat meat, they eat other animals. Herbivores eat plants, and omnivores are able to eat both. So this is a food chain which goes from the bottom to the top, and the top of the food chain is the most powerful carnivore in the ecosystem. And they are the top of the food chain. But how does the food chain work? So it starts at the bottom with the producer, which is a plant that grows using water and sunlight and nutrients from the earth. In the ocean, there are creatures called phytoplankton, which convert sunlight to energy in the euphotic layer. Above the producer is a primary consumer, which would be a herbivore, maybe a cricket, or a larger creature which is her herbivore would be a cow, still a primary consumer. So above the herbivores there's a line of carnivores. Everything above the primary consumer will be a carnivore, and they all eat the creatures below them on the food chain. And a creature that eats another creature is called a predator. A creature that is eaten by another creature is called the prey. But these definitions can be a little bit flexible. So the mouse, for example, eats the grasshopper, the cricket. So in this case, the mouse is the predator and the grasshopper is the prey. But then the snake eats the mouse. So now the snake is now the predator and the mouse is the prey. So the process continues until we reach the top of the food chain, and that creature at the top of the food chain is called the apex predator. But of course we've talked about this as if it were very simple, and it's almost always not. Snakes also eat crickets, and sometimes hawks eat mice. So creatures at different levels of the food chain can eat each other. And also, when creatures die from not being eaten, then a decomposer is required to break up their bodies to put back into the earth. And even an apex predator, when it dies, will be broken down by decomposers. And these are what we call detritivores. So we can go one step further and see that in fact any food chain can be thought of as a food web, because many different creatures are involved in an ecosystem, and so eventually different predator-prey relationships will form. So this is a very simple food web, of course, and they can get very big, and basically the food web defines the ecosystem, but it can also cross over into other ecosystems, and in many ways the boundary between ecosystems is a little bit soft, a little bit blurry. In fact, if you really want, you can think of the world as a global ecosystem. If ecosystems just blur together, then you could think of the world that way, and in fact many scientists think exactly like that now. They think of the world as one giant system, and this system is what we call the biosphere. And that's where we'll leave it for now. We've talked a little bit about ecosystems and the way that food chains work to build them, and next time we're going to talk a little more about that other word, the biosphere. Bye bye for now.